This is Limited Supply, the place for refreshingly real takes on what D2C is really like.
We're your hosts, Nik and Moiz. Let's start talking about money.
All right, Moiz, we're back. This is episode 7.
Yeah.
Yep, episode 7. We got to give a quick shout out to all of our international listeners. I didn't realize Chartable goes so in depth with international charts, but we are top 10 in the USA, Great Britain, Canada, South Korea, which we're number 3 over there, Spain, Brazil, Mexico, Norway, India, we're number 2, Slovenia, Pakistan, and Qatar.
Pakistan.
Actually, Pakistan, I think, is at 14 or 15. It's not top 10, but
really? Okay,
we are pretty close.
I'm going to get on WhatsApp after this.
Yeah, you got to get all the aunties in the group chat and start sending out the links.
Yeah, no, that's where all my click farms are.
Yeah,
so they'll just download, listen, 10,000 people
That's
in one location in
Yeah.
Karachi will be listening to it.
So big thank you to all our international listeners. We do need reviews, though. We've got top 10 charting. We just don't have it. We've got one review, and one review said, finally, these guys did it. So we need more reviews. We're going to pick 4 people to start, and 4 people who leave a review are going to get 15-minute calls with Moiz and I, and we'll go through. We'll just you can come to us with 1 question, 2 questions. We'll answer it on Zoom. And
to be clear, reviews means you have to write something out, right? Not just a rating. It's like
Apple
an actual
Podcasts
review.
or Spotify.
Fine. Fantastic.
You can write a review.
And does it have to be a 5-star review or can it be a 1-star review?
It depends if they want the call. I would say it depends.
Okay, fantastic. Well, great intro. A bunch of stuff that we want to get through today. Allbirds had earnings that they came out with a couple days ago. I want to talk about those. Really amazing to see what Allbirds earnings look like. Allbirds actually started in 2016 after Native. And so I always follow them because we sort of started at the same time to see, hey, what should Native be doing compared to them? And they're much larger. And so a ton of stuff to talk about there. We're going to talk about scaling a new brand. Let's say you launch a new brand. What should you be doing to actually get sales? We're going to be talking about a new gig that we have,
side hustle.
Yeah, side hustle that we talked before. We talked about how you should create a pixel auditor.
Right.
This is another one that is also worth a fortune, and I'm really excited to chat about it because I've always wanted this as well. Procurement, we're going to chat about, and then brands that we love.
Sweet.
Okay, so let's start with Allbirds. How's that sound?
That sounds great.
Okay.
First of all, do you like the shoes?
I own 1 pair of the shoes, and I have not worn them for a long period of time. But that's not necessarily Allbirds' fault. I'm I'm traveling.
I find the shoes get really hot.
Really?
You can't wear them anywhere. That's my problem.
It's like a San Francisco brand, and it's perfect for San Francisco because it never gets hot, so you need something warm on your feet. And in San Francisco, everyone has them.
Right.
So you just look around and you're like, okay, everyone's got these Allbirds. They're like Nikes.
Yeah.
When I'm in New York and I see someone wearing Allbirds, I'm like, oh my God, that guy really cares about direct-to-consumer businesses.
Or they're a nerd.
Yeah, or they're a nerd. And my parents live in Dallas. So I'm in Dallas quite frequently. If I see someone in Dallas wearing Allbirds, I will be like, hey, what do you do in your life that you know about these brands?
Right.
So I do think that it's a little bit of a West Coast vibe sort of thing. But I think that let's talk a little bit about their numbers and I'll tell you why I like the business.
Perfect.
So last quarter, they did $78 million or $26 million a month, which is absolutely crazy. I would guess that Native's probably on about $200 million run rate at this point. I mean, these guys are north of that. They've fundraised, don't get me wrong. And so I would expect them to be north of that, and they're not profitable. So I guess that's also a thing, but $26 million a month, which really blows my mind. One thing that I found was really interesting. So they announced they gave this report and they announced all of these numbers. Mm-hmm. They haven't issued their 10Q, which will go into more depth. But based on basically the conference call that they had and the earnings that they released, they said performance footwear did $20 million out of the $78 million. So about 25% of sales is performance footwear, which is really surprising because when you think about Allbirds, you never think about I'm going to go to the gym. I need my Allbirds.
Yeah, not at all, ever.
And did
that start with the Adidas collab that they did?
I don't know. I think it started before that because I think they had some like runner pairs. I just wonder if they call it performance footwear and everyone else just thinks of it as casual.
Yeah.
Or like, Nike is clearly performance versus casual, right? You're not wearing Air Force Ones to the gym. Sure. You're not wearing Jordans to the gym probably. You're wearing like, they're like whatever they've got.
Yeah,
sneakers, exactly. Yeah. And I wonder if Allbirds actually has a performance footwear market or everyone is just wearing the performance footwear as a casual sneaker. But I thought that was really interesting.
My guess is the latter. But on their site, their shoe looks like a replica of, have you ever seen the Noble runners?
No.
Nobull. They're actually a cooler direct-to-consumer brand because they're completely bootstrapped for a long time. But they have a runner that looks exactly like the Allbirds performance shoe. But I do know that I feel like this is a relatively new category for them. So it is pretty impressive to get to a quarter of their overall sales very quickly.
Yeah. The other thing that they mentioned was their primary driver of the increase in sales now is retail. So basically, they're just like, we have 50 stores at this point, or 35 to 50 stores, something like that. And that's the primary driver of increase in sales. So it's not direct to consumer any longer. It's brick and mortar. But they don't break down sales. They're not like, 40% of our sales is coming from brick and mortar and 60% is coming from direct to consumer.
Yeah.
Like I haven't seen that type of breakdown. If they've released it, I haven't seen it. And that would be really helpful for investors like myself to help. Because then I'd be like, okay, how much does it cost to open up a store? And is this worthwhile? Like, let's say it costs you $1.2 million to open up a store. You've got to design it. You've got to furnish it. You've got to train some employees. You got to put up a bunch of signage. You got to sign a lease, all that kind of stuff. If it costs you $1 million, $1.2 million to put up a store.
Yeah.
How much revenue are you generating from that store on a yearly basis? They're not releasing any of those types of numbers, but it really makes me wonder how to think about the business. I remember talking to Outdoor Voices a long time ago, and I think they only had like 8 stores, and they're like, these 8 stores are the reason we're so profitable. They drive a ton. Wow. The operating costs are low. There's no marketing going to running a store. It's not like we're running Instagram ads saying, hey, go to the store on Broome or in West Hollywood. They're just like, these stores are statements in of themselves. They have a sign up and people come to them. So the primary driver that Allbirds announced in their sales, the primary driver of their increase in sales was the retail stores.
And that's their owned and operated retail.
Their owned and operated retail stores. I think they had 35 at the end of the year last year, and now they've got something like 50 or in their mid 40s or something. So they're opening up stores at a decent pace. And I always wonder, like, they don't break down revenue in terms of what comes from direct to consumer and what comes from brick and mortar stores. And I think that'd be super helpful for investors.
Do they break down like owned channels? So both those versus like a Nordstrom?
I think they do, but I'd say like 98% of their revenue is coming from their own
themselves.
Channels. Yeah, I think they've recently announced that they're exploring other channels more seriously.
Sure.
But so far it's been basically their own stores or allbirds.com.
Yeah.
And I'd love to understand, like, how much revenue is being driven in stores and how much does it cost to open up a store? Like, is it $1 million to open up a store between the furniture, the signage, hiring and training employees, all that kind of stuff? And then how long does it take to earn that store money back? Like, are you doing $1 million in revenue per store? Or are you doing 4 or 5 million, 10 million per store, such that I'm like, okay, you know what? You can open up a lot more of these stores because you have got a lot of margin here. So they don't go into that type of depth. But I remember talking to a guy at Outdoor Voices a long time ago. I think they had about 8 stores, maybe, and by a long time ago, I mean a couple of years ago. And they were like, these 8 stores are super profitable for us. They're the reason we make money. They have no marketing acquisition costs. People are coming in. They pay for themselves and then a bunch. And so they help actually subsidize the direct to consumer business and the marketing side of this things. And I always thought that was really surprising. I'd love to get into the economics of this.
Yeah,
and then
same.
like, how many stores can you open up? Like, you can open up 50? Can you open up 500? Like, can this be the next Gap or Nike store? Maybe. But I think it'd be helpful to know the economics to be able to make that decision.
Totally.
One of the other things they announced was, they're like right sizing the ship. They have a lot of SG&A. Unclear how much of that is coming from operating stores. SG&A is sales, general, and administrative expenses.
Okay.
So it doesn't mean like the cost of the goods, and it doesn't mean like marketing, because that's generally in operating, and it doesn't mean like freight, but it means like, how much do I need in wages? How much do I need for my office space? How much do I need in like,
overhead, basically.
Yeah, exactly. Like random overhead.
Cool.
So unclear how much of that, like SG&A is 42 million, or half of all revenue goes to SG&A, which generally means that you're paying a lot, it could be a lot of wages.
Yeah.
Because you have a lot of stores at this point, right? It
Sure.
could be a lot of we have to buy stuff for the stores, and that goes in SG&A as well.
Yeah.
It's just unclear with those numbers. One of the things that they found I found really interesting is they wrote down $11.6 million of their inventory. So basically, they had all this inventory, and they're like, first gen apparel. We had so much of it that we need to take it off of our books. And so we're saying this $12 million, let's say it cost us $24 million. It's now worth $12 million because we're going to either we're going to have it on sale, we're going to discard it, we're going to give it away, we're going to do something. And so they wrote down $12 million of inventory, which is a lot.
Yeah.
I talked to a bunch of companies, and a bunch of companies that I've been chatting with also have excess inventory because they, the good days of 2020 and 2021 are sort of not that good any longer in 2022. And they ordered, supply chains got to be 6 months. So they're like, we need to order everything today.
Yeah.
And then 6 months later, they're like, okay, the economy isn't as good. Our sales aren't as good. And we finally have caught up with the amount of inventory we needed for 2020 sales. So sales are down and inventory is up. So what should we do? And I wonder how people get rid of excess inventory. Have you seen anything interesting in terms of getting rid of excess inventory?
Yeah, I'm forgetting the guy's name. There's a guy in Miami who does this. He will say, okay, you have $1 million of inventory or $2 million. He, like Macy's will call him or large companies, large and small will call him. And he then has a software where he can basically scan a barcode and within seconds it's listed on like Christmas.com, on like all these marketplace sites that you've never even, thought of going to.
Yeah.
eBay, Christmas.com, like gifts.com. And he can churn through inventory quick. But the catch is that he buys it, pennies on the dollar or buys it at like 80, 90% off.
Yeah. There's a couple businesses that, a couple things I think you can do. At Native, we had that problem once. And so what I did is I sold our product into a subscription box, like a FabFitFun competitor, basically. Right. And I was like, hey, why don't you take our product? We'll give it to you at cost. And in reality, at cost meant I just need to get rid of this inventory. So please take it and pay me for it.
Right.
And they did. And, we got our product into the hands of a bunch of new customers. And so I thought that was a really clever idea of like putting it into a subscription box or trying to sell it into a subscription box.
Yep.
And if you can't sell it in and you're going to give it away, give it to a subscription box so you can get your products and consumers. The other thing I thought of is like a mystery box. So let's say you're selling apparel. Apparel is maybe tough because you got to get sizes. But if you're selling, cans of soda, I'd be like, here's a mystery box with random flavors. You don't know what you're going to get. It's 40% off. And we're going to put in the flavors that we've got excess of and maybe a couple of the ones that you want. And that's a good way to get rid of excess inventory as well.
Yeah, the mystery box they kind of act as like a new product in terms of reaction from a customer list. A YouTuber friend of mine, Danny Duncan, he'll do a mystery box and he'll sell something for $69. And it's just, you have no idea what's inside. You just know the value is higher than what you're paying.
Yeah.
And he'll get a huge tranche of orders from people who are excited to do that. I just looked up the other guy. His site is cartsquad.com.
Okay.
And
awesome.
so basically he'll scan your thing and then it plugs into, like probably 30 different marketplaces. And it just helps liquidate all your inventory.
That's great. Yeah, I think it's going to become a bigger and bigger problem for a lot of direct-to-consumer brands as they overstocked. I think the hard part is how do you balance getting rid of inventory without hurting your brand?
Right.
Like, you don't want to be sold at Ross or TJ Maxx necessarily.
Right.
And so you got to make sure that like the brands that you associate with are brands that are going to be not dilutive to your own. And that's why I think the mystery box is so good. You're basically selling it to your own customers in a way that gives them a discount, but you're not like, hey, this can of soda is actually worth that I'm selling to you for $1 worth $2 elsewhere.
Yeah.
You're trying to like prevent it from diluting your brand by hiding the identity of the item.
Yep.
The other thing I thought that was interesting with Allbirds is they only spent $16 million in marketing on $80 million in spend.
That's crazy.
Which is so low. I'm sorry, $80 million in revenue, which is so low.
I wonder how they categorize expenses. I do remember a lot of brands were running, they would categorize their store costs as marketing costs. It seems like that's not happening here.
Yeah.
Or I wonder if like SG&A maybe includes some of the advertising revenue for stores or because it could be counted as store marketing.
Yeah, that's a great question. I always thought Casper was trying to do this in a sneaky way where I was like, your marketing costs are low, like too low based on the number of ads I see and the amount of revenue you're doing. Like, I don't believe this math makes sense.
Yeah.
And then you'd see balloon costs elsewhere and you're like, I see. Because, what's great is you want to try and hide costs in SG&A. Because then when I go to an investor, I'm like, look, I only spent $18 million in marketing and I did
Right,
$80
to make
million in
78.
sales. It sounds great, right? Because you're like, wow, that's fantastic. You know, you could spend a lot more. We'll do a lot more in sales and this is great. But you don't realize a bunch of that marketing cost is hidden in SG&A.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that's the case with Allbirds, but I feel like other brands have done this in a way that makes their investment look like a great opportunity. But
sure.
SG&A, and you know, SG&A theoretically shouldn't scale as much, right? Like you're not going to have 3 CEOs when you have 100 stores. You still have one CEO,
right?
And so theoretically, SG&A shouldn't scale the same way that marketing costs would. But I do feel like a lot of brands, just like you mentioned, try and hide that, and that's a little scary, actually.
Yeah.
Hard to sniff out.
Agreed.
The other thing with Allbirds, which you know, they called it like a simplicity initiative, and they're doing a hiring freeze. They had to lay off some people. So you know, Allbirds people are stellar people. Like this is a great brand that has grown a ton. So if you're looking to hire, go on LinkedIn, find people who used to work at Allbirds. You know, I bet a bunch of them are going to be looking for new roles, and a bunch of them are really talented in the space.
Sweet.
Okay, let's switch gears. Those were Allbirds earnings. I love going through e-commerce publicly traded companies'
they're
earnings.
the best.
Because I'm like, finally, you have to share with me your numbers.
Exactly.
And you can't lie here.
Did they share their acquisition costs at all?
No, they didn't show they don't talk about new customers versus returning customers.
Got it.
And I bet they have a good idea, a good sense of that because I bet they're using the Shopify
I think
POS
everything
system.
is Shopify for
Yeah,
them.
even in brick and mortar stores,
Yeah.
which is pretty crazy. Like I'm sure they're one of the 5 largest brands on Shopify.
They've
with
gotta
like
be.
Figs or something.
Yeah.
So good for them. They didn't share the customer acquisition costs. I wish they did. But I love these public. I'm like, you can't lie.
Yeah.
Although in like investor decks that are, you know, where people are trying to raise money from me, I see lies all over the place.
Yeah.
Sometimes inside the deck, I'm like, page 7 and page 12 say diametrically opposed things. Which one is true?
Yeah.
And, you know, here you can't, and you have to have attorneys look at it. So I love going through these publicly traded earnings. Publicly released reports. But okay, let's switch gears and talk about scaling a new brand.
Yeah, so this came to mind just before we were starting to record. So this is something that I see happen a lot for brands that launch. And basically a brand launches, they have sometimes they launch completely bootstrap and it's somebody who just launches it because they either have an audience or they know they can get an audience. A great example of this is there's a Instagram influencer / doctor named Amir Karam. He's an Indian guy in San Diego. And he's got a few 100,000 followers. He launched his own skincare brand, KaramMD.com. You know, 3.5%. It's a shit site, but 3.5% conversion rate. Great revenue. Like hit 6 figures his first week of launching. Like phenomenal business. Completely bootstrapped. So that's one way to do it. The other way is where I think a lot of people that you and I talk to end up, which is they've raised some money. Maybe not a ton, maybe just a little bit. They've spent money developing this brand identity and everything looks super cool and the site looks awesome. The products are cool. The packaging is nice. But then it's like, okay, the thing is live and now where the fuck are the customers? And they're nowhere to be found. And so that's one thing. I think the other one that I've seen, the version of that I've seen with celebrity-backed brands or celebrity-partnered brands is the CMOs usually come from large CPG companies, a L'Oreal, an Estee Lauder, P&G, a Unilever, and they have no idea about the 0 to 1. They've done the 100 to a billion or the 50 million to 200 million, but they've never done the 0 to 1. And so, you know, the common thing I get or I see is like, they're just like, you know, we have this beautiful brand. We're running ads. We're doing everything we're supposed to be doing, but why are we not getting sales? And the biggest easy call out is, well, you're running ads like Kate Spade runs ads, which has been around for decades.
Yeah.
And you guys have no reason to be around and you're trying to run ads in the same way.
Yeah.
And so I thought for this segment, we could do, you know, what are 3 things that every brand could do to help them hit their first 100K or first $1 million much faster?
I love that. That's a great question. And you're so right about those CMOs like coming in and being like, great. You know what they do? They're like, let's launch like a marketing initiative. And they're like, we need this one halo, like this one tagline.
Right.
And then we're
Big
going to create all these
campaign.
assets around it. And, you know, as someone who's done 0 to 1, I'm like, this is useless. That idea will fail in the first $500 of Facebook ad spend. You'll realize that idea has failed.
Yeah.
And then you will have all of these other assets that will be completely worthless, just like you are to this brand. So get the fuck out of here.
Yeah. Imagine if like Native was, you know, it was like Native deodorant use less. And it's like, who the fuck cares?
Yeah.
No one cares. It makes no sense. It has no tie back to the customer, back to the product. But for some reason, these large scale campaigns where Ada, you would basically just focus on each part of Ada is like what they die by.
Yeah, I think one of the reasons they do that is because they're like, look, we need to spend. When I was leaving Native, our marketing budget was like $40 million a year, right? And I was like, look, I want to spend this on direct-to-consumer, social ads and all this kind of stuff. But if you're running Tide and your marketing budget is $400 million or $200 million a year or something to that effect.
You just have to do dumb shit.
Yeah, I mean, imagine you got to spend a lot of money. Like if someone said, hey, let's spend $200 marketing this business, I'd be like, God, I got to think of, I don't know how to spend $200 million. I got to think of a lot of dumb shit.
We go tattoo our fans.
Yeah, a lot of crazy initiatives to get to work. And so then what you do is you call up some marketing agency that sits in New York or LA, and they're like, here's this 24-year-old guy or girl who just graduated college, and she's your account manager, and she's going to talk to this guy, and he once sat next to a guy who did the Coke commercial that was the Hilltop commercial, and so they know what they're talking about. And so you got to spend $2 million, and you're like, great, I need to spend $200 million, so here's that check and let's get going. And then you assign a 24-year-old on your team to work with that 24-year-old. And that's how all these people that are 24 years old that have marketing jobs on Bumble get employed. That's what they're doing. That's what all these 24-year-olds on Bumble are doing. But I think what you asked is a much better question, which is how do you actually get from 0 to 1?
Yeah.
And I think, I'll start with an idea and then you start with an idea.
Cool.
How's that sound? Okay.
Perfect.
So the first thing that we did was we posted on Product Hunt, which I thought was really smart because it got us 60 sales. And we're like, you know what? This is a good enough idea that people will buy this product once we are able to get their eyeballs on it. And we got their eyeballs on it for free. And so that was really helpful.
Yeah.
One of my other friends started a clothing brand. And he joined a forum called Style Forum. And basically he started creating a thread on there. And he's like, I'm building this clothing brand. Here's what I'm doing with it. Here's the leather that I'm getting. And here's where I'm sourcing it from. And here's what's really important. What do you guys think? And it took him like a year to from start to launch. And while he was building, he was talking on this forum and more people started reading his threads because he was updating it with really interesting information. And so by the time he launched, he had eyeballs. People who were like, this is a really active forum. People who were active on this forum knew his brand. And he's like, we're finally live. And then they went and bought the product in a free way. But over the course of a year, it took time. He launched a product and he didn't launch to crickets.
Yeah. Yeah, so basically building in public, talking about the process.
Yeah, building in public.
Sharing more of it. Yeah.
I love how you summed up everything I said in 3 words. That's exactly right. Build in public.
Yeah, I love that. So one thing I think about a lot is focus on education versus selling. And I think I think it's always been the key. Like even if you think about like advertorials, right? It's basically education over selling, and it's entertaining over focusing on direct selling. But I think especially the last 2 years with TikTok blowing up, everybody just wants a good story. That meme of story time going viral in the comments from TikTok. Like everybody just wants a good story. They want to learn something. They want to get something out of it. And I think like for brands that focus on explaining why they deserve to exist there and why they deserve to have a website and be able to ship you something, focusing on educating that piece versus just come try us. We've got the best serum. It's made with this hyaluronic acid. It's made with this. No one gives a fuck, but they want to know something they can get out of it.
Yeah. Yeah, I recently had a phone call with some guy who was starting a brand, and he's like, look, our brand uses the best ingredients, and everyone else just says that. And I was like, that doesn't stand out because everyone says they use the best ingredients. Right. That is not enough. Yeah,
no one's going to say, we use the second best.
Yeah, that's right.
Dermatologist.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a great Seinfeld
we use stuff
skit.
That's not dermatologist recommended.
Yeah, there's a great Seinfeld skit where he's like, everyone says they have the best doctor. Not everyone can have the best doctor. Yeah. And then he's like, if you're going to visit Dr. John, tell him that Moiz recommended you. And then he's like, what is that going to do? So the doctor's going to be like, oh, Moiz recommended you? Oh, okay, then I'll give you the real medicine. I was going to give you the fake medicine, but Moiz. Here's the real stuff.
Exactly.
Okay, here's another interesting way I think that people can launch, which is like marketing campaigns in their launch. And 2 brands that have done this really well. One is Harry's. I'm not sure if you remember this, but when Harry's
Sign up?
launched, yeah, they did this thing where they're like, sign up and refer friends. If you refer 5 friends, you're going to get a free razor blade. Like if you refer 10 friends, you're going to get a razor blade and a handle. Refer 20 and you're going to get a razor blade, a handle, and shaving cream. They made all of this public. They even put the code. They put the code up there so you could recreate this platform. And when you not launch to crickets. And that was the line that I remember they used. They're like, when we launch, we don't want to launch to crickets. How do we do this? They created this referral campaign before they launched. So they're like, go refer your friends and, we'll get bigger. That's how we won't launch to crickets. And I thought that was really genius. Since then, so many brands have tried that, and it hasn't worked nearly as well as it has for Harry's. Yeah. I think Harry's said they launched with 100,000 customers or at least 100,000 email addresses because of this campaign. So I think you have to do something innovative. Another company that did something really innovative was a company called Mailbox. Do you remember those guys?
No.
So they were an app, like an email app on your cell phone.
Okay.
And you downloaded the app, and they had a countdown. They had a wait list, and they're like, this is what number you are on your wait list.
Yeah.
And so I downloaded it. I remember I was like 80,000. And like 10 times a day, I would look at the app to see where I was on the wait list. And I was like 70,000, 60, 50, and it probably took me 2 weeks to get an invite.
Yeah.
And every day that I had downloaded it, but was not had not started using it, I was looking at it like 5 times, 10 times a day. Like I was multiple times a day. And as soon as I started using it, I was like, this app sucks. I'm never using it again. But it was such a clever strategy of launching. And look, within 3 weeks of launching, they sold their business for $100 million to Dropbox. And probably like 6 weeks after that, Dropbox is like, turns out nobody's using this app. Yeah. The only thing people were using it for was the download count, or like, the counter in terms of the wait list.
The excitement to get it.
Yeah, exactly. And once we opened it up to everybody, nobody cared about it. So it's gone now. But, that was a really clever way of launching. And so I think you need to think of those types of clever ways to stand out from the crowd.
Yeah.
I don't know what the next one is. If I did, I would probably launch another brand simply by virtue of having a great idea to launch.
Yeah.
But I think that's also a great way to launch, to not crickets and not cost you anything.
Totally. One last one I'll throw in there is a lot of brands actually don't even know who their customer is. We have a brand we just started working with. They'll do $140 million in revenue this year. They're like, yeah, so between retail and even online, we have no idea who our customer is. So can you help us figure that out?
Yeah.
And I think for especially a new brand to be able to message well and run ads in an effective way, I think you have to know who your customer is, like where do they live, their gender, their age, that's for sure. But I think you also got to understand, where do they get their news? Where do they consume their content?
Yeah.
What apps do they spend the most time on? If they were posting to Instagram stories, what are they posting?
Yeah.
If they're retweeting on Twitter, what are they retweeting? What are they liking versus retweeting? And I think getting that definition of your customer, then you can look at any marketing opportunity in the future and you could say, well, this doesn't really work because our customer doesn't do this kind of stuff, or this works really well and here's why we should do it.
Yeah, that's a great idea. Let me mention one thing since we're summing this up now.
Yeah.
Is don't launch like this. Like what you should do is launch and try and launch privately and quietly, and run some ads and see if people are interested in the brand. Don't spend $2 million on a marketing agency, building a really nice website, and building out really great packaging, and then launch to crickets. You are going to be disappointed if you do all of that work.
Yeah.
No brand launches and they're like, guess what? We just did $500 million in sales today. Great idea. We were all right about everything.
Right.
Like you are going to launch and you're going to be disappointed with your sales. So work your way up. And I think it was like Reid Hoffman who was like, if you're happy with the first iteration of your website, you waited too long to launch, you should be embarrassed. And one of the guys who does this really well is Hims. They launched, Hims as the Viagra seller under a different brand. I forgot what it was called. And they started running paid ads to it. And they're like, within spending $10,000 in paid ads, they're like, this is the greatest idea we've ever had. Let's stop running paid ads to this site that doesn't work. Let's take down this brand and let's actually go build out Hims, because we know we've proven this works with spending $10,000 on ads. Totally. And I think they created a sign up for him. Yep. The other guy who did this really well is Justin Mayers at Kettle and Fire.
Yeah, he's the man with this.
I love this. Yeah. He's like, he launched Kettle and Fire and he started running ads. People would buy the product on Shopify. He'd never made it. And he would email them instantly and be like, look, we don't have this product. I will give you a 100% refund right now, or we will launch this product in 6 weeks and I'll give it to you for 50% off. Mm-hmm. You tell me what you'd like and I'm happy to give you a refund right now or give you half off 6 weeks from now. And, a bunch of people would take the half off. But more importantly, he's like, even if people ask for the refund, he's like, people will buy this product. This is what my cost of customer acquisition will look like. That is a much better way to launch.
Yep.
Don't launch the crickets. Don't even launch
make
up
brand.
everything.
Yeah. Go to Unbounce, use the trial, make a fake brand, and launch it. You could do exactly what you did. Take the colors from one brand, the fonts from another.
Yeah.
Go to
Take them from
Unsplash,
native.
get some free imagery, throw it up, build a lander, and do it.
Yeah. Yeah. Natives.
You could really test a brand in less than 15K.
Definitely. Okay, great. Let's switch gears and talk about procurement. First, I think that was a really great conversation because I think that's the question I always get asked, which is how do I launch a brand now?
Yeah.
I've got this idea. I want to launch it.
Right.
Do it on the cheap to make sure it works. Do not spend a ton of money and try and do it without anything to have a proof of concept. What's going to investors and being like, look, I've got this idea. I want to raise money is not worthless, but it's not very good or compelling to an investor. What's much stronger is to be like, look, I spent $10,000 in Facebook ads. I generated $50,000 in revenue. I didn't have a product. It shows that you're committed, that you hustle, that the unit economics on this business will work and that people care about this. Like those are ways to prove that your business will work without a ton of money.
Agreed.
Go do all of those things.
Yep. Fully agreed.
Okay. Switch gears to procurement.
Okay.
What is procurement?
So you don't know what procurement is, which is crazy to me because you worked at P&G.
Yeah.
So every large company has what's called a procurement department and sometimes a chief procurement officer. Procurement is like your Indian mom who makes sure your bills are right. Like you're not overspending anywhere. You're not getting a bill that's $1 higher, a cent higher than market rate. So for example, if you're a marketing agency and you say, we're going to go work with Bacardi on this project, first of all, they'll say, well, we don't need you. We have tons of agencies. We have tons of agencies that have been approved by procurement, so we don't need you.
Bacardi will say that.
Bacardi will say that after inviting you in. Then they'll say, oh, you do want to work with us? Okay, well, here's what our rates are to work with you. And it's like they set
Bacardi
your
is
rates.
saying this is how much we'll pay.
So let's say you say, well, this whole thing is going to cost, I'm just making numbers up here. Let's say it's going to be $100,000 a month retainer, and that breaks down. They're like, well, why is that $100,000? Oh, well, this is how much it costs. Blah blah blah. Okay, well, give me the hourly rate for every person on your team, and they will beat you down.
Yeah,
and so I hate procurement with a passion.
I want to add $50,000 to deal with your bullshit.
Yeah, exactly. And so they'll beat you down, and they basically come to you and say, well, your opportunity is working with us. And so anyways, all these big companies have it. Fabletics has it. Bacardi has it. P&G has it. And so why does it exist? Well, it exists basically to ensure that the company is getting the best rates or the best market rates possible. So if somebody says, we're going to buy you Facebook ads and charge you 15% of media, they're going to be like, well, we have Starcom that'll charge us 6%, even though they know nothing about buying ads. So why is it relevant here? I think that it's, going back to what you say a lot of the times, which is, double check your bills and make sure you're not getting overcharged. I also think that, like for long weekend, I just texted our Shopify Plus rep yesterday and I was like, hey, so there's two procurement services that are common. One is called Main Street, which I've used personally. The other one's called order.co, which I haven't heard of, haven't used until I looked this up. But Main Street, the way it works is you basically pay them 20% of what they shave off for you. So if you're paying $2,500 a month for Shopify,
and they get you a discount, they take a cut.
So that's $30,000.
Okay.
If they get you down to $1,500, and that's $18K, they'll take 20% of $12K, and that's their fee. So it's kind of a genius idea. The only thing that I wonder is, does it create a bad relationship with me and Shopify now when I need something next? Or do I get kicked out of the next, beta? Like we're in a beta for a new Shopify launch coming soon. Are they not, they're going to be like, no, fuck this guy. He haggles us and we're not going to give him the beta. But I also just texted our Shopify person and said, instead of dealing with them, could you just give us the deal directly? And so I think procurement is something you don't have to use an outsourced firm to do it. I think it's something brands could practice internally. And really all it is for a smaller brand is just saying, hey, is this really the best rate you could give us? Like, what else can we do or what else can you guys do to help us out on this rate?
Okay, gotcha. A couple things to that. One is, it sounds like a double-edged sword, and that Bacardi would be like, hey, we're going to pay you $100,000 to do this. And you might be like, well, I was going to charge you 50, but 100 sounds great.
Sure.
But I bet that never happens.
Never.
Yeah, that never happens. Two is really interesting that you can save money on Shopify with order.co. So I know nothing about this, but it sounds like if you're on Shopify, call order.co and try and save 20%, or Main Street and try and save 20% off your Shopify bill. Makes a ton of sense. I guess the other concern I would have if I were Bacardi is I'm like, okay, great. You want to do this in $100,000? Guess what? We're going to give it we're going to give you the shittier team. Here's we've got real surgeons. You want to go here? Let's say you're getting surgery. Do you want to get the guy who's going to charge $25,000? Or you want to haggle? And they're like, yeah, okay, this guy will do it for $10,000.
Right.
That's a little bit scary. And there was one instance where Native was making boxes, and every couple months I'd call them up and be like, I need to shave off a few cents on this box. And within the first few times I didn't notice, but a year later I was like, this box is worse. And they're like, how do you think we're shaving off these costs? We're using cheaper cardboard. We're, shaving off some of the panels to make them cheaper so that you don't use as much. We're using thinner cardboard. And I didn't notice it right away, but within a year I was like, okay, you get what you pay for, and I'm getting something shittier.
Yeah.
So I wonder how much that happens.
Totally.
But this is a great segue into our next conversation, which is procurement for direct-to-consumer brands in two different ways.
Yep.
One, and this also ties into
these are the
side hustles. These are side hustles. So procure me better rates from my fucking 3PL. Every 3PL in the world is run by a crook.
Yep.
That is there are three things that are true in life. Death, taxes, and your 3PL is cheating you. Okay. And I'm positive of number 3 more than I am of the first 2.
Yeah.
So, I want someone to sit down and audit my 3PL bill every single month.
Yep.
I want them to look at every packet, every line item. What does this package weigh? And how much did you ship it? How much did you spend shipping it? Did you charge me the right amount? You said on 3-pound orders you were going to charge me $5.
Yep.
This one's $5.60. What the fuck? You're selling me boxes. You're all of a sudden charging me more for these boxes. Or, you were packing everything in a 3x5x2 box, and now all of a sudden it's 6x4x8. And now I'm paying more. A couple of my brands, I've seen people send stuff and the box is the size of a refrigerator.
Yeah.
And the item is the size of a Coke can or a deodorant, and the box is a fucking refrigerator sized box. And I'm like, did this customer open this package up? And they're like, what massive gift did I get? And it's the size of a deodorant when it's a refrigerator sized box. So your 3PL, I want somebody to audit 3PLs and look at, is the storage cost make sense? They're charging me for this many pallets, this many bins, this many shelves. That sounds like too many shelves this month. Why is it this many shelves? I want them to audit, are they adjusting my postage too much? Because this package ship, they said it was going to weigh 3 pounds, it weighed 4, but it should have actually weighed 3 or should have weighed 2. So I think a side gig would be audit 3PLs. And you could just be like, look, I only work with Ship Hero. I only work with, what's another 3PL that you know?
Stored.
Black Wolf. Yeah. I only work with Stored.
Yeah.
And I only look at their 3PL bills because I know how to read them really easily.
Right.
But I will, if you're a client there, send me give me access to it. I will look at it and audit it, and I'll take 50% of the savings.
Yeah, I think that's genius. I think that that same mentality applies to even branding agencies, marketing agencies. There's so many times where I've heard, I was just on the phone with somebody before this, and she's like, yeah, we're using Bluecore for email, which costs us $160,000 a year. And I was like, have you heard of Klaviyo? Who made this decision for you? They work with some agency to get off the ground because that's what they were pitched as the best option. And it's almost like these founders just get tricked without knowing it. But I think something like an audit service, whether you come in for 3PLs, whether you come in for your agencies, whether you come in for whatever, I think it's huge. And I think this is easily something where any brand doing over $100,000 a month would say, yeah, we're going to spend $5,000 a month just making sure, $5K a quarter, we'll put an audit together, and, Jeff or Carrie's going to come in and do a full audit of everything we're doing and tell us everything where we're getting overcharged. Yeah,
I think it can also be, hey, look, we're going to audit this, and whatever I save you, I'm going to, order.co, I'm going to take 20 or even 50% of, or fuck, take 100%. I'd rather you have it than
for
my
the first time
3PL crook, you know?
Yeah.
The other interesting way to do this, so I think that's one side hustle, and I think that's a great idea, is audit 3PLs. And you're right, you can probably audit other things too. Like if I'm hiring a branding agency to do, to create some out-of-door logo, like to create postcards that I'm going to be handing out outside the New York City subway, and you're charging me 10 cents a postcard when it should be 3 cents a postcard.
Yeah.
That's a great audit as well. The other side hustle I think that can exist here is optimizing servers. This doesn't necessarily happen with Shopify brands because Shopify brands are using Shopify servers, but a lot of companies that are not on Shopify are working on AWS. And there's almost always a way to optimize your AWS server to bring that cost down. Like people are like, they just throw more and more issues at AWS, and AWS can scale up really easily. And so it solves a problem. The problem is you're just paying more for it because you're eating up more of AWS's server's bandwidth.
Yeah.
And so if you optimize your code, you can actually bring that cost down, and that cost down stays with you perpetually, right? Like let's say you were paying, at Native, we were paying probably $7,000 for a server for AWS servers at any given time per month. If you'd optimize that server and brought it down to $3,500, I'd probably split that $3,500 of savings with you. And now you're making $1,750 a month perpetually because I've switched, because I'm saving $1,750 a month perpetually too. So I think that's a great side hustle.
Yeah, totally.
Not as necessarily relevant as auditing 3PLs, which I would love to do right away. Okay, great. We're going to wrap up with a few things. One is shout outs to some brands.
Yep.
Two is I'm really excited about a couple things coming out, which is one, we're doing an interview with Harvey Finkelstein for
Harley.
Harley. Sorry. I don't know why I said Harvey. I was thinking
it's a Suits. It's a common. I'm sure it's common.
I was thinking about Suits. Harley, and we're doing that in early September. We're going to shoot it in early September, mid-September. Really excited about that.
Yeah.
I mean, this guy has a bird's eye view of e-commerce in the way that nobody else does. And he has, both from a tactical perspective and from a forest rather than trees perspective, I'm really excited to chat with him and to chat with him about,
I'm excited to poke all the holes, I was telling Ben before this, I don't care about his personal story. I want to get to the details of, why are you not doing this?
Yeah.
How is Shopify going to help merchants with this?
I think that I want to get to that as well. And I think Harley's answer might be like, look, we're going to get to it. And that's people at Native would always be like, why aren't you doing more influencer marketing? Why aren't you doing these 10 things? And I'm like, dude, we're going to get to that shit. Give us time. We haven't been around that long. Shopify's probably like, look, we've got a bunch of stores on here. We've onboarded them. We've, acquired a delivery company. Like we're probably doing these 15 things. As a Shopify shareholder, I hope they get to all of those things faster.
Same.
So I'm excited to have that conversation with Harley. The other person that I'm trying to get on is this woman named Shannon who sold a deodorant business to Harry's. She sold it earlier this year or last year. And I really it was very quiet sale. I think it was Harry's first acquisition. And I know the deodorant category well, and I've been talking to her for a long time. So we've been chatting on Instagram a little bit back and forth, and hopefully this puts a little bit of pressure on her to join the pod. And I want to ask her all of the questions. You sold your business to Harry's and didn't tell anybody how much. How much?
Yeah.
First question. There will be no beating around the bush. How much did you sell for?
Yeah. You
Second
don't answer
question,
it.
Yeah.
Press the button. Couch falls.
Yeah. Second question doesn't even matter. First question we got to get to.
Yeah.
Okay. But before we get to all of those things, I want to talk about shout outs to brands.
Yeah.
So, give me a shout out to a brand that you really love. We'd love to hear about it.
Yeah, so one is, it's actually technically direct to consumer, but it's like 100 years old, which is Moscot. It's an eyewear company in New York. At a basketball game, I was randomly sitting next to Zach Moscot. That was his last name.
Wow.
And I was wearing my Warby Parker glasses, which I've had on for like 6 years now.
Yeah.
He's like, "Oh, you should. Those look a little old. You should probably get some new glasses."
Wow.
I was like, "Where do you recommend I get them?" He's like, "Go to Moscot." So I went there. And just the best eye doctors for an eye exam, like the most, kind of like what Tend does for dental, which Tend is probably my other brand here. What Tend does for dental, kind of making it not scary and not aggressive and not like, there's things going in your mouth.
Yeah.
Moscot does that with your eyes. So it just felt like I was a celebrity when I was there.
That's awesome. I bought glasses from them as well, and they have amazing frames.
Yeah.
Did you get a sense of how successful the business is? I'm curious to know, let me ask you this. When Zach left, was it in a Bentley or a Toyota? Or you didn't get to see?
I didn't see, but I would imagine the way he was like talking and his swagger, I think it was a Bentley.
Love it. Good for him.
Yeah.
Okay, my brand, I really love Sanzo, which is actually the soda I'm drinking. I purchased this soda. I've not been gifted anything from them. I don't really know the brand well. I'm not an investor. But they're building in public, which I really like.
Yeah.
And the founder seems so genuinely grateful for all of these opportunities.
Yeah.
And he has some Asian heritage, and I'm not entirely sure where he's from, but as a result, his flavors have Asian inspired. And so they're always a little bit more interesting than I'm expecting. I would expect a root beer, not a lychee sparkling water.
Right.
And so I really like the brand and don't mind paying for it. But I'm really grateful to see how much he builds in public and how excited he is about the brand. For me, when I was at Target and a native would run out of stock, I'm like, what the fuck are these people doing? Someone go in the back and stock this shelf. And he's like, I'm so grateful that people are putting Sanzo in the front of Target. And I'm like, wow, I want to be like him more.
Yeah, he's a great dude.
Have you met him?
Yeah, so I invested in Sanzo's first round.
Oh, I had no idea.
Yeah, when I met him, he had cases of glass bottles of Sanzo just crowding his apartment. And I was like, this guy is going to make it because he's so determined, because he's such a hustler.
Yeah.
And every time I meet him, he's just one of the nicest guys in the industry.
Yeah. Yeah. Industry has enough assholes like me. I appreciate the nice guys. So
yeah.
I want more of them.
It's all about balance.
It's all about
diet
balance.
soda and cake.
Awesome. Well, that's it for episode 7. Episode 8, we've got a bunch of stuff lined up, including one thing that I really want to get into that we didn't have time for today, which was Quibi.
Yep.
Quibi was this Meg Whitman and Katzenberg idea that could have been the next TikTok. Sort of the same idea, but they zigged when they should have zagged, and it cost them $100 billion. And I'm really excited to get into that.
Let's do it. All right. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. And please leave that review. Nick and I are excited to do these calls, 4 calls, 15 minutes each with people who leave reviews.
Yep.
Awesome. Thanks again.
See ya.
Thanks for tuning in. We'll be back next time to cut through the noise in CPG, retail, and e-commerce.
And if you enjoyed this episode, then why not share it with a friend? And be sure to subscribe on whatever platform you listen to your podcasts on.